Welcome into the Viva Alberto's podcast. As always, I am your host, Jake Wood, and I am joined this week by writers Gabe Simons, Matt Smith, and the pace setter of Cardinals podcast, Scott Plaza. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. How are you all feeling this evening?
I had no idea I was on a pod with Tyrese Halliburton over there, Scott Plaza, the pacer of, wow, just incredible stuff. I feel, pace setter, excuse me. Okay, I thought pacer, but anyway, I feel pleased to be on in the company of such greatness.
So tonight, unfortunately, we were supposed to be joined by Eno Sarris, but due to what I'm calling technical difficulties, we were not able to connect. So you, unfortunately, get the four of us tonight to discuss some of your favorite Cardinals topics. Hooray, yay! The Cardinals finished a sweep of the Houston Astros today, and it seems as though that the Cardinals are good this year. Who knew? Gabe, I'm going to throw it over to you first. What are you seeing from the Cardinals right now that should give Cardinals fans a little bit of optimism? What is something that is happening this season right now that Cardinals fans can really lean into?
Their offense, really. I don't know how much of that was the Astros pitchers just being god awful, but I appreciated that they kept scoring runs each game, and that we saw Mason Wynn come to life in his hometown, and Jordan Walker in his quote-unquote slump is still getting hits and walking a little bit, even though he's striking out a little bit more than I'd like, but that might be a part of his game going forward. Herrera's I appreciate that we can watch a game and be like, we might score 5 runs, and hopefully that continues, because I'm not necessarily more optimistic about the pitching, but especially after our bullpen is making games a little bit tighter than they maybe should be. But for now, I'll take the wins. Absolutely.
Scott, as the resident pitcher in the room, I want to throw it over to you, and I want to ask you about Riley O'Brien. We're seeing some real dominant stuff at the back end of games. The stuff is just filthy, and I looked up some of the numbers this week, and he is like one of the top 10 best right-handed relievers in baseball since last June, whenever he was called back up and stayed for good. What is Riley doing so well that's allowing him to have the success that he is right now?
Well, if we've been seeing the Jordan Walker Baseball Savant page circulate, I think it's time we see the Riley O'Brien Baseball Savant page circulate, because it's even more red than what we saw from Jordan Walker. And I've been seeing Mason Miller, of course, getting a lot of his well-deserved love for just being a freak. But I think with Riley O'Brien, it's just truly he's healthy, and this is the role that I think a lot of us saw him fulfilling last year, and had the excitement of it, and even probably the year before. He's always had the electric stuff. He's had that frisbee of a breaking ball, and it's just been, we see a flash, and then it's Riley O'Brien's down for 15 days, and it was never anything like super concerning. It felt like it was like always 15 days at a time, and then he ramped back up, and then it was another 15 days. I think right now he's just comfortable, healthy. He's building into what we expected, and it's very, very fun and exciting, and he's filling in some of the holes that unfortunately Stanek and Swanson have left for Riley O'Brien to kind of clean up.
Yeah, thankfully the Cardinals at least have, 1 to 2 guys in the back end of the pen that they can, comfortably rely on. I still think that some of what JoJo is doing is a little bit gives me anxiety. It's not always the cleanest innings, but he finds a way out of it because that sinker is playing so well this season. I think a lot of teams are trying to sit on that slider, and whenever they don't get it, they're just beating the sinker into the ground. Matt, I want to ask you about J.J. Wetherholt. We're seeing we talked pre-show. You've been really impressed by the at-bats he's been taking and kind of what he's been able to, set the tone with in terms of like what Gabe referenced to the offense. The offense is something that we're all really positive about right now. What is it about JJ and his approach that has really impressed you so far in this early portion of the season?
Well, I think it's like a full count for J.J. Wetherholt is just like slipping into a nice warm bath, like a bubble bath. He's just at home there. I don't even get concerned. Like, there's some guys that go up there and they get into an 0-2 count, and I'm like, well, this at-bat is over. And with Wetherholt, it's got at least 6 more pitches before some kind of outcome is going to happen. But I think this speaks to a surprising strength of to Gabe's point, the top 4 in the lineup. Now, granted, Jordan Walker is like somewhere orbiting Saturn in terms of what we thought his capabilities were at this point in the season. But that first four of Wetherholt, Herrera, Burley, and Walker, that's like a professional top of the order that can manufacture runs, drive in runs. Herrera is walking more than he's striking out, even if the contact stuff is not quite there for him yet. So I have been extremely impressed with Wetherholt, but he's kind of this chain of guys at the top that's sort of driving the Cardinals winning so far.
For sure. And from JJ Wetherholt, let's go to another guy who's showing well offensively right now. Gabe, I'm going to throw it right back to you. Hit a monster home run last night, and then also had a scorching double late in the game today. Jose Fermin is showing a little bit of pop with the bat. Do you think that Jose Fermin should be getting a little bit more extra run right now? Because I believe the last I checked, he has like a 120 WRC plus. Now, granted, small sample size and what he's gotten, but he, like last year, and what was it, 60 or so plate appearances at the end of the season, he also had like a 150 WRC plus. So he seems to be just picking up right back where he left off at the end of last year. Yeah,
I mean, there are some Fermin believers. We need to come up with a catchy nickname for that one. But his AAA numbers the last two seasons were unbelievable, to the point where like it feels like he should just get plate appearances based off that. And considering that we're rebuilding, we're in a position to be able to just get some plate appearances. You might be for real, you might not. Like that. He's the kind of guy that rebuilding teams give playing time to and to see what happens. And probably more than half the time they don't become anything more than like a bench player. But I mean, he had a 145 and 147 weighted runs created plus the past two seasons in Memphis, and he wasn't like an old guy doing it either. He was, I believe, 25. Well, he's 25 and 26, but he was 25 when he did it the first time. And if you do it at 25 or younger, I start to pay attention. But his one potential drawback is just like that he doesn't have any power. And if he starts showing power, he should absolutely keep getting playing time, because right now his competition is not exactly is not exactly doing what we're hoping they're doing. So it might as well go to him. Well, one outfielder that he's showing more power than is Victor Scott II, and I know Scott Plaza has been very critical of what we've seen so far from Vic. Scott, can you kind of talk about where Vic is and what you're seeing from him, and kind of what changes you would like to see in his approach going forward?
Well, let me first start with the positives, that if you want to see where Victor Scott is on the leaderboard in the Major League Baseball, well, we thought it would probably be stolen bases at this point of the year, but actually J.J. Wetherholt is ahead of him. But he is at the top of the league for sacrifice bunts. Exactly what we want, I guess, from somebody that just, pitchers used to do that from the 9 spot every game.
Woohoo! Bunts! I love bunts! They're the best! Woohoo!
And one thing that we won't know is that coming from the dugout, or is that coming from Victor Scott? And I don't know. If I was Oli Marmol, I would just, and I see him put a bunt down, I would just be like, you went to the voodoo witch doctor. You're supposed to show off what it is that you're supposed to be able to do, which is just put the ball in play. And sure, putting down a bunt is putting the ball in play, but when everybody knows it's coming, then it's going to be easy to defend. And that's how many of those sacrifice bunts have come with runners in scoring position, you ask? 4. In 20 at-bats, he's laid down 4 sacrifice bunts with runners in scoring position. So the guy is already out there ready to score. All you have to do, again, put the ball in play. Even if he doesn't score, maybe you get on base with a single or something. He's just not doing anything that is really worthy of him getting this playing time. I know, Jake, you told me to be careful about it when I said it in the offseason, because he does tune in and hears this stuff. And I said I would love to be wrong. Right now, I don't think that I'm going very wrong in my conversations with Victor Scott and what maybe he is not going to be able to do at the next level. And I think right now that he is playing his way into a conversation with either demotion or Nathan Church moving over to that everyday role in center.
And thankfully we have our premier guest of the night due to what we're calling technical difficulties. This week we are joined by a very special guest. You can hear him on MLB Network, Foul Territory, and his own show, Rates and Barrels. You can read all of his written work for The Athletic. He is one of the predominant minds when it comes to the analytics of baseball and making them digestible for everyday fans. Welcome to the show, Eno Sarris. Thanks for working through that. We really appreciate you hopping on.
I'm so sorry I'm late. Just a lot of stuff upstairs.
Well, you know what? Now we got a lot of stuff going on downstairs. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I've followed your work for years. It's made me a smarter, more informed follower of the game. I know our readers and listeners are big fans of yours as well. So seeing as how we're on a bit of a time crunch tonight, let's dive right into the good stuff. So I asked Scott about this player, but I'm going to throw it over to you, and we'll get a little bit deeper on this, right? Riley O'Brien has gotten off to a terrific start and has been one of the 10 best right-handed relievers in baseball since June of last season, is kind of the sample size that I looked at whenever he was recalled, and then has kind of stayed in the majors since then. What is O'Brien doing that is making him so dominant right now?
I think he's really just commanding the ball really well. I was a little bit worried early in the spring his stuff was down a little bit, but I think that was just the weather or just ramping up. I mean, the one thing with relievers is, it can take them 2 or 3 outings to get right in spring, and that's what Riley O'Brien did. And I'm glad because I have tons of shares and was all in on him. I thought he had the best stuff. And then normally, JoJo's fine. JoJo's great, but he's a lefty, and managers still prefer the righty in the role. So I think it's the excellent stuff that he had last year plus a little bit better command now.
So Stuff Plus has not been particularly kind to Cardinals pitchers over the last 5 or so years, and it's been pretty deserving. So I want to ask if there's a certain type of pitcher, starter in particular, where you think Stuff Plus might underrate how good they actually are. Like, what kind of traits would that pitcher have? Do the Cardinals have that kind of pitcher? Because hopefully one of the guys in the rotation you think might pitch better than what their Stuff Plus says.
Yeah, I guess the kind of player that would outperform it would be somebody who had a lot of pitches. That's a thing that we're trying to figure out how to put into the model better. It's it's a fact that the more pitches you have, the more a batter has to defend basically or prepare for. And so, how good any one pitch is actually a function of how many pitches you have. We haven't really dialed that number in and figured that out. Baseball Prospectus has an Arsenal stat that's pretty interesting. We have just made a little mini breakthrough behind the scenes that we think will do something similar in a different way. And that, but just generally now, if you're looking at relievers, Stuff Plus is really good at, because you have 2 pitches, you have 3 pitches. How good are your pitches? That's basically what it is. But starting, you're trying to get through the lineup. We know, for example, from research in the past that every additional pitch you throw softens your third time through the order penalty. And so we know that as a fact. So, just having a larger arsenal, even if they aren't great pitches. So one guy that comes to mind, I know I just said that, and it's rude, but Mike McGreevy, I don't know that any one of his pitches is really great, but he has a ton of them, and I like how he mixes them up, and he has really good command. So I think McGreevy is always going to do a little bit better than his strikeout rate would say, and his K-BB or his Sierra or his Stuff Plus, because he's going to keep batters on their back foot. And then Liberatore is, another guy that could do that. He's been softly kind of expanding his arsenal over the years. I really like the addition of the cutter just because it gives him 3 fastballs that he's now throwing. And I thought this year might be a breakout year for him. Maybe he just turns out to be, I don't know, like a Steven Matz type or somebody who's just like, solid back end guy, kind of bounces around, finds something out in a year and has a really good year. Maybe it won't be what we thought, when they traded for him, but and then Quinn Matthews, honestly is another type. The Cardinals, for all the mistakes they've made, have done things in this old school way that does set them up for success, even when put against the new school models. So, who do they like to draft guys with big arsenals in command, and that's not a terrible thing to do. Now, best case scenario, they now take the modern technology and, you know, a lot of what Heim wants to do and like apply that to guys with big arsenals. And that's hopefully the way forward for them.
I'm going to keep mine a little bit more broad and wonder when we look at these rate stats and then like when we look at what they did last year compared to where they are at this year, when is it go the shift from small sample size to what we can truly believe in, and does it change for hitters and pitchers? And I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into it, but at what point do we start worrying about velocity compared to years before, or things like that?
Oh, yeah. Actually, velocity is the first one you worry about, actually. My pal Jeff Zimmerman did some work where he found that one start tells you pretty reliably if they're coming off the DL or if it's a new year. One start tells you a lot. 2 starts tells you almost everything. And 3 starts tells you everything. So if somebody's velocity is down through 3 starts at the beginning of the season, that's not good. If they go on the IL and come back and their velocity is down 1 or 2 starts in, that's not good. So velocity is one of the very first things, and that's why Stuff Plus is really meaningful in small samples. But the real answer to your question is like the different stats that you use, each one of them has, you know, more meaning in a certain amount of sample. And that's why projections are one of the best ways to look at players, because what they look at is at each of the stats, they look at how much sample we have. They regress each of those differently, and they produce a projection. But if you want to do it on your own, looking at it, I would say for starters, you know, if I had 1 start, I'd probably ask for fastball velocity or Stuff Plus. If I had 2 starts, I want Stuff Plus. 3 starts, Stuff Plus. 4 starts, it's still Stuff Plus, but K minus BB starts to be a really powerful predictor, you know, around 4 starts in. And around 4 and 5 starts is when location numbers come online. And then, you know, 5, 6 starts after that, Sierra is a really good one. DRA from Baseball Perspectives. That's when when you get to about 6, 7 starts in, that's when some of the ERA estimators become pretty predictive. So, again, you know, and then the worst ones are ERA, pretty much not predictive all year. You know, another one is one of the very worst ones is home runs. Home runs per 9, home runs allowed, whatever it is. That is so much noise. And then, of course, batting average on balls in play is one of the noisiest stats. So, you know, each stat has its own sort of thing. When it comes to hitters, if I had one game, I have one number for you. It's bat speed. And I know that that's a complicated thing because people want to say bat speed doesn't matter and look at the bat speed list, and Freddie Freeman has a slow bat, and, you know, Luis Arias has a slow bat. Generally, if you want to hit homers, you have to swing the bat fast. If you want to hit Mason Miller, you have to swing the bat over 80 miles an hour if you want to hit a homer off at Mason Miller. So, like, you know, bat speed does matter, and in one sample, in one game sample, it's the only thing that can tell me anything. But then, of course, as you get more sample, I think hitting is really hard. I think early on, sort of swinging strike rate, strikeout rate becomes meaningful, but that's like 2-3 weeks in. 4 weeks in, you get barrel rate. Barrel rate is really predictive. You know, ground ball, fly ball mix, that you can start to say something about somebody 3 or 4 weeks in. But, like, for example, just to bring it, to finish up and bring it home to you guys, like, Jordan Walker always swung the bat fast. And so when he swings the bat fast and does well in a small sample early on, you can't really tell too much off of that because he always swung the bat fast and he still swings the bat fast. But what I have seen is a little bit of a change in attack angle, a little bit of a change in tilt. And these are things like Stuff Plus that become meaningful quickly. They don't tell you everything about a player, but when you're comparing Jordan Walker to last year's Jordan Walker, you can say, you know what, the swing is a little different. It looks a little bit different. He's doing some things a little bit different. And so I'm buying in on what Jordan's doing right now.
Oh, you stole the question right out of my mouth. And they've got me batting fourth here for questions, so I think I've got to go low OBP, high slug on my questions. I think is the rule. This question is probably too soon to ask, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. J.J. Wetherholt, extremely early in his career, but we've got some college data and some minors data. Could you offer a comp two Cardinals fans. Like one that you see floating around the internet sometimes is like a rich man's Brendan Donovan, which Brendan Donovan is already a very good player. So is there a type of player, a mold that you could see a comp for Wetherholt being?
I mean, it would be somebody that controls the zone, really well. He has a really great sense of the zone. Somebody who doesn't have, I would say, 55 raw power or 60 raw power. I think he's more sort of 50 raw power. I mean, when I see players like this, and I hate to paint with too broad a brush, but, like a lefty Bregman.
Okay.
Is like somebody I see, because Bregman has just done all those things. He's gotten a lot out of a similar bat speed. I'm not saying that everything lines up. I mean, he could be better defensively, but Bregman's really good defensively, at a similar position. So I like that comp. I think Bregman is a good comp for him. I don't know what he's like in the clubhouse. I haven't really interacted with him that way. He probably has more speed than Bregman. So I don't know if there's somebody along those lines. I mean, if 99th percentile is somebody like Mookie, because he's got the walk rate and the strikeout rate, and Mookie never
Speak it out. We love it.
Yeah. And Mookie never had that plus bat speed either, but I mean, you'd have to a lot of things would have to go right for him to be Mookie Betts.
Sure.
Well, as the resident leadoff man, and Matt's analogy there, I do want to follow up on JJ a little bit. What is he doing so well right now? Like you said, he's controlling the zone in such an effective manner, but what do you think will be key for him to take his next step in that development? Not necessarily where he needs to become Alex Bregman, kind of like you had talked about, but just for him overall, where he could take his game to the next level. What's that next step look like for him?
I would just assume that it's putting an A swing on a few more pitches. Making sure that when he pulls it, it's in the air. Right now, his pull rate is like above average, but it's a fly ball rate is below average. It's small stuff though. It's not like Walker where you're hitting the ball into the ground. So I think it's more just getting a sense of what pitchers are trying to do to him and like anticipating pitches better. I'm not saying he's doing it badly. I'm just saying finding those moments to take the big swing. Because when I see, a 72 mile an hour bat speed, 52% pull rate, and all that contact, I bet you sometimes he's making contact where he's cursing on the way to first, and he's like, I could have waited for a better pitch and hit one there. But one thing that's really interesting is he has a pretty good zone rate, about league average, and he has a great chase rate. And the difference between those two I found is like becomes meaningful quickly and is really solid throughout your career. So he could become more aggressive, possibly. That might lead to more pull in the air. And he might chase a little bit more because of it. He might miss a little bit more because of it, but it might work for him.
So from the outside looking in, what is your stance on Ivan Herrera and where he should play? Do you think that the Cardinals are right to keep trying him at catcher? Do you think he should try to move to first or left, or do you think they should just plop him at DH because his bat is that good?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is that with that kind of bat speed and that kind of swing strike rate, like I'm in love with you already. So, I think it'll be fine wherever he ends up. I honestly don't think I'm well equipped to answer this question because this kind of stuff is really y'all's thing. It's like an everyday watching thing. I can just tell the story of in fantasy we were wondering what Augustin Ramirez might do this year, and there was a camp that said that his defense mattered and he might not might have the defense for the position, and they ended up being right. And I think Ivan's a better hitter than Augustine, and so it won't matter. I think he'll hit wherever he puts, and I think he'll be a player. But it's better for y'all to really watch this and say, what you think, because I mean, I kind of want to throw it back to y'all because, catching defensive numbers are good, but we make advancements and we change them. Here's my story on this. Yadi Molina was not a Hall of Famer. according to Fangraphs WAR for so long. And I remember like people asking, and I have a vote, and I was like, like I hear from St. Louis that he's a Hall of Famer. Like I hear from fans that he's a Hall of Famer, and I know the offensive numbers aren't great, but I'm willing to like. So I was like, I don't know. Then they figure out how to put framing numbers in. They put framing numbers in, and voila, he passes the sort of 50, 55 win threshold, and he's a Hall of Famer all of a sudden, So, I don't know that I'm going to vote for Sal Perez when it comes down, because it's a similar situation where the offensive numbers aren't great, and his defensive reputation is even worse. It's definitely worse. I mean, Yadi's the king of D. So I don't know that I'll vote for him, but with catchers, I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, what happens if we come up with a number for game calling, next week, and like we're like, oh my God, Sal Perez is the king of game calling, So the team has a better sense. Y'all have a better sense than I do.
It's complicated by the fact that we have two top 100 prospects in AAA, and then another top 100 prospect in High A that are all catchers right now, with no sense that they're going to move. So
yeah.
That's what's throwing a wrench into the whole question.
And it's not like you have a ton of hitters where like, oh, I don't know where to put him. So I would assume that he ends up somewhere else. So.
Well, I'll try to make mine a little bit more clear with, understanding defensive positionings and where that all comes with the rate stats. But Mason Wynn, what does he need to do to become an all-around top 10 shortstop in baseball if you don't see him as that already?
Yeah. I think it would kind of be similar to my answer for Wetherholt, where it's just taking his chances. It could be possible that a weighted bat program might be interesting for him, because he has a great ability to make contact. And in fact, weighted bats plus being a little bit more aggressive might be an interesting thing for him to do. Because when he is more passive as he is now, it takes away from his zone swing. It takes away from what he's doing in the zone. So like more aggressive in the zone, more A swings at the right time, hopefully without striking out too much more, but tapping into the power basically. That's the last thing. I mean, the defense has been great. He's a really interesting player because he's fast, but he doesn't steal bases. And his bat speed's not bad. It's above average, so it's around average. So he could have around average power. So it's a little bit, I guess I would just say, turning the athleticism into more results on the field. So just sort of figuring out when to turn it on. He's got to be able to steal bases. Why doesn't he steal bases?
He gets thrown out. It's very odd. Yeah, you would think with that level of athleticism and sprint speed, he'd be great at it, but it just never has been. I don't know.
Does he have bad instincts on the field? Is that like a thing that you guys notice?
I wouldn't say that at all. I think, well, obviously last year he had the torn meniscus, so that was definitely a factor in probably some of the overall what you're seeing. But they put him in at cleanup to start the year, and so and he wasn't hitting to start the season either. So I think there was just a lot of like circumstance as to why he hasn't been taking a lot of stolen bases. Mm-hmm. They've kind of put him in more of a run producer role rather than a table setter, and I would think that if he was hitting either like second or eighth, perhaps, like he would be doing a lot more of that running and that table setting. And
to be clear, like I don't think he needs to like run to be a better star. Like that's. Stolen bases are one thing. I'm just saying that's sort of a thing where it's like, oh, I think he has more raw power. Why hasn't he accessed it? I think he has more, stolen base ability. Why hasn't he accessed it? So I tend to think that you're like 1,400 plate appearances in, 3+ years in. We know all we know about him. I don't know. Like you said, there's been the injuries. He's 24. I bet you. One of these next 2 years, you could get like a 25-25 season out of him. It wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, we would love that. This is possible that this question will be a fastball right down the middle, and we can just check your zone contact percent here. If you have $100 to bet on 2 Cardinals to be All-Stars, and I know that seems crazy to be talking about All-Star, but honestly, the voting is not all that far away, and I think like early season success kind of gets weighted in that vote. How are you splitting up $100 to bet on two All-Stars from the Cardinals?
I'm going to go 75 on Walker and 25 on Burleson.
Ooh, okay. What's the Burley case like over Herrera or over some of the, because you love Herrera. What's the Burley case?
He's got a head start. And I don't think that they, all-star voters don't tend to look at WAR. So, they don't care that Wetherholt's ahead in WAR. All-star voters tend to favor batting average. And I think Burleson will, just maybe because of the head start, or also because Burleson hits for average. It's kind of a deal that he does. And he looks good early on. He's got a lot of banked hits, and so I think I throw some money his way.
You talked about Matthew Liberatore earlier in the show, and you also talked about Michael McGreevy. I want to kind of shift the focus back to the rotation a little bit. The other starter I wanted to ask you about real quick was Dustin May. He had a rough first couple of starts to the season, and, he's turned into really good starts since then. So what changes did he make in his last two starts that can give Cardinals fans some optimism that the first two starts were, maybe you could make the case were the anomaly and not, the norm, and the last two are more of what to expect from May this year?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you because I don't know exactly what made it work, but I can tell you why I liked him. Is that he's kind of brought back the four seam and the cutter and the curve, and he's upped his arm angle, and he's throwing more like he did when he was ginger guard. And even something as simple as the velo coming back. So the last two starts was the best four seam velo of the season for him. I would also say in terms of his pitch selection. He was a little bit more even when it came to his three fastballs. And I guess he actually reduced some of the curve and change usage and kind of focused on his top four pitches. But just generally, I was waiting for this to happen because, with the upped arm angle and the slightly better four seam and cutter, this is the best possible version of him, I think, because what had happened over the last few years was his arm angle was dropping. And with his arm angle dropping, he became a real sinker sweeper guy who was very sideways, and he didn't have anything that was vertical that could change things. So I think that he needs to be able to throw that four seam and cutter and upset anybody who's looking sinker sweeper on him.
I was kind of wondering if you could think historically of players like Jordan Walker, who struggled for multiple years as a very young player, who suddenly just, at the snap of a finger, seemed to figure something out and then just exploded onto the scene. And were those players like that, not maybe as good as Walker's been, but did they just level up for good, or did they fall back down to earth? I'm kind of curious from a historical perspective if you have any players in mind.
I mean, Adrian Beltre was interesting. He's a little bit different though because his defense really kept him on the field. When people come up with like Robin Yount and Adrian Beltre, the one thing that they do have in common with Walker is that Walker came up pretty young. And when you come up pretty young, you get some grace and you might have some up and down, and that's the through line there with Robin Yount. They're not the same player at all. But even somebody like Reggie Jackson came on later in his career, and I think just the through line for all these guys is they came up young and they struggled at first, and for Jackson, maybe it might be the closest to being comparable because he really wasn't tapping into his power as much as he could, and then he really found his power, and that's the comp for me. I'm sorry it's not a more recent comp, but I think there are a fair. I can't off the top of my head think of guys, but the ground ball rate is an interesting thing because every year that you're in the big leagues. You hit fewer ground balls. So for him to come up and his biggest flaw was hitting the ball into the ground. There's other guys that have done that. I just don't have their names right in front of me.
I think we can appreciate a couple Hall of Fame comps.
Yeah.
When you said Reggie Jackson, I felt my eyes get wide. Like, what?
Well, I mean, we don't have ground ball numbers for Reggie Jackson, so I can't tell you what his swing tilt was.
I'll do my last question with looking towards. Imagine you're in 1 or 4 fantasy dynasty leagues. Which Cardinals prospect would you be most invested in for the future?
And that's assuming that I can't take Wetherholt.
Yeah, Wetherholt has graduated.
Yeah, it's not my strong suit, but I guess there's some. Okay, I'll just take Joshua Baez.
Okay, nice. I like that.
We can't argue with that pick.
I mean, Fangraphs has him with 60, 70 raw power, and I'm seeing a 20% strikeout right now. I've heard that's the result of a bit of a swing change, and right now the strikeout rate's back up. But the really interesting thing about guys with big raw power and big tools and big strikeout rates in the minors, people tend to focus on how high their bust rates are, and that's true. Sometimes their bust rates are pretty high, but what they miss is that their star rate is also pretty high. Like if you look at guys like James Wood in the minors, he's going to have a big strikeout rate, and think of even something like a Joe Adell. It took him a second to get there, or there's plenty of examples of guys that have this. Baez in the minor leagues had a big strikeout rate, and Javi Baez. And so Josh Baez, I look at this as this isn't the type of player I've loved in the past. I've always been trying to find the next Mookie Betts and a guy with a 12% walk rate, 12% strikeout rate, and power and speed. But I wouldn't look at Baez's strikeout rate right now and say he can't make it in the big leagues. I think that's something that people miss, is that these types of players have a really high star rate as much as they have a high bust rate as well.
Well, I do think you just told us earlier that J.J. Wetherholt is going to be Mookie Betts, no?
I mean, what's great is that you could have J.J. Wetherholt right next to Baez, and that would be the two of them, would complement each other. One's taking walks and hitting blasts, and Wetherholt's putting the ball in play,
Yeah. As you might imagine, Cardinals Nation is basically just one bonfire of everybody's hairs on fire at the same time about Jordan Walker. Just the turnaround that he's experienced. Okay, Jake, you're all right, buddy. At what point does the whiff rate and the K rate for Walker start to eat into this hot start? Now, he's probably not going to hit 65 home runs this year, right? But at what point do those K rates and those whiff rates start to become unsustainable for this player that he seems to be kind of turning into before our eyes here?
Yeah, I think the one thing that is true about high strikeout rate guys is they're streaky. So I think what you all have to do, or what I would suggest you do, is that you don't jump ship when he has a bad streak. Because a guy with a 30% walk rate, and what's cool is a 30% strikeout rate with the walk rate as it is now, and I think he has right now the best combination of being aggressive in the zone. Like some of his changes to what he's done in terms of discipline have been as good as anything else, and so what I would say is he'll hit like a couple weeks stretch where he's taking walks and striking out and not hitting dongs, and a lot of people will jump ship, and I just think generally I see enough where he'll maybe end the season with a 250 average, 260 average. It means there's going to be some bad times going forward. I'm going to take the over on most of the projected OBPs. I'm going to give him like a 330, 340 OBP if he can keep this up, and then with the 250 average, I'm going to give him like a 475, 500 slugging. So those numbers are below where he is now.
Sure.
So that's baking in regression, but it's also above where he's projected to be. So
and from where he's coming from, like if you told that to Cardinals fans before, they would sign in blood to get that kind of result out of Walker. So that's really encouraging to hear.
Yeah, I think it just takes some time. I mean, I wouldn't. I know 1,000 plate appearances in, you feel like that's a lot, and especially when you live it, and you're like a fan of it, and it feels so exhausting and long. But then you're like, well, it's really like parts of 3 seasons, like that's easier for me to say from the outside.
Right.
I kind of want to wrap the show tonight with my final question for you. A part of the big contention between all of us is kind of the as Matt would term it, the catcher wars, right? Between Pedro Pages and Ivan Herrera and some of their deficiencies that we see at the major league level from the catching spot. But there's also, a young catcher at AAA named Jimmy Crooks who's, really tearing the cover off the ball. He has a 172 WRC plus at AAA, but, obviously with that there is the catch that he has a 35.4% K percentage at AAA. So if you're projecting that forward to the major leagues, it's probably somewhere right around 40%, if that's a fair estimation based on just jumping up another level. He's got a 34% chase rate, a 38% whiff rate, an 18.2 swinging strike percentage. So he's like 14th percentile in all of AAA. Can you kind of explain why the transition to the major leagues from that type of an offensive profile probably is not ready yet and would not work out? Because, amongst Cardinals fans, really, there is this clamoring for a Jimmy Crooks to ascend because, quite frankly, a lot of them are just tired of watching Pedro Pages on a nightly basis. And so, what can you kind of lay out for us why that would not work out at the major league level?
I mean, I just think, to some extent he's depending on poor command from the opponent. And then you get to the big leagues and everyone's command is better. That was something that Tommy Pham was saying about, he just came through the minor leagues again to come up with the Mets. And he was like, it's not so much the stuff actually, because he said in single A, I was seeing guys with, hitting high 90s with crazy sliders, and everyone's got a stuff plus number, so everyone's got got that dialed in. He said, it gets harder as you go up is the command. So I would assume that somebody who's already whiffing like this, and yes, it's nice to see he's walking so much, is that he's going to be pretty passive and he's going to depend on the command of the opponent a little bit. When he gets to the big leagues, they're going to have better command, so they're going to be able to throw the 2-0 slider in the zone that he might not expect. And so, I would expect somebody like this to maybe, but I would also just point out that catchers debut later, they peak later, and this is, okay, that's true. Those things are just true from research. But then, like, anecdotally, I think I've spent a lot of time looking at catcher offensive numbers in the minors and been like, oh my God, this guy's going to be great. And then they come up, and you're like, well, they're pretty good, but that's not what I expected, given those minor league numbers. Like, I feel like the disconnect's even harder. And I think that's probably because of how hard the job is. So you have to prepare for so much. I mean, just look over at Carter Jensen, with the Royals. And I'm not saying anything bad about him. He's doing great. But Carter Jensen struck out, 7 to 8% less often than Jimmy Crooks in the minor leagues, and he's striking out 32% of times in the major leagues. You know what I mean? And Carter Jensen, like, he's hit the ball harder than Jimmy Crooks has ever hit it, 5-6 miles an hour harder ever, and his bat speed is like 2 or 3 ticks harder. So Carter Jensen is like a way better offensive prospect than Jimmy Crooks. I just have to say it that way. And he's hitting 237 in the big leagues with a 32% strikeout rate. And I'm not saying that's it's all written and that's what he's going to be. I'm just saying it's so hard to be a catcher that's why you find they debut later, they peak later, they have a harder time in the major leagues when they first get there. It's just a lot. You're given the keys to the starting rotation and the bullpen, and you're told that you have to prepare for this and this and this all in the same day, and it's a lot. Remember how we thought Logan O'Hoppe was going to be, the next coming, and he's okay.
He's just not
it's
what you
fine,
thought he was
but-
going to be. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and take that, Matt. I was right. I'm just going to write that down right now that Eno said I was right. So just without you being able to rebuttal, I'm going to say that I was right. Once again, that was Eno Sarris. You can read all of his written work over at The Athletic. You can hear him on his show, Rates and Barrels, and you can also follow Eno on various platforms at Eno Sarris on all the social medias. Eno, thank you so much for the time, and we'd love to be able to catch up with you later on in the season.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Once again, that is the great Eno Sarris, for writers Gabe Simons, Matt Smith, and podcast Poobah, Scott Plaza. My name is Jake Wood, and we will talk to you next week when we are joined by 1120 KOX Sports Director Tom Ackerman. Have a great week, St. Louis, and let's go Cards.